The new black officer had barely finished her first shift when two fellow cops decided she needed to be put in her place. They mocked her, questioned whether she belonged, and treated her like an outsider wearing the badge. What they didn't know was that the woman they were humiliating wasn't just another rookie. She had been assigned to their station for a reason, and by the end of the day, their entire chain of command would change. But what happened when they finally discovered who she really was? The station had a reputation for being tough, proud, and deeply set in its ways. For Maya Thompson, a 34-year-old black police officer with 12 years of experience, walking through those doors was supposed to be the beginning of a new chapter. She had earned every promotion through long nights, dangerous calls, and years of proving herself in departments where she was often the only black woman in the room. Maya wasn't looking for special treatment. She wanted the same thing she had always wanted: serve her community and do the job right. What she didn't know was that her new assignment had placed her in a department where some officers had already decided what they thought about her before she ever introduced herself. On her first morning, the looks started immediately. Conversations stopped when she entered the room. A few officers glanced at her uniform, then at each other, as if trying to figure out why she was there. Maya noticed everything, but she stayed calm. She had learned a long time ago that sometimes the biggest mistake was reacting before you knew the whole story. And there was something about Maya's transfer that none of those officers understood yet. They thought she was the new officer who needed to prove herself. They had no idea she had been sent there to evaluate them. Maya's first few hours at the station quickly became a test she had never asked for. Instead of being treated like an experienced officer, she was repeatedly questioned about her assignment, her credentials, and whether she had really earned her position. The comments were subtle at first, hidden behind smirks, suspicious looks, and unnecessary challenges. But by midday, the behavior had become impossible to ignore. During a routine briefing, Maya was assigned one of the least desirable patrol areas while newer officers received easier assignments. When she questioned the decision, the response made it clear that her concerns were not being taken seriously. Then came the moment that changed everything. Two senior officers stopped her in the station hallway and demanded to know why she had access to certain administrative files. They assumed she had crossed a line simply because she was black and unfamiliar to them. Maya calmly explained her authorization, but instead of checking the facts, they treated her explanation as proof that she was being difficult. The humiliation didn't end there. Later that afternoon, Maya was sent to assist during a tense situation outside a local business. As she arrived, another officer deliberately stepped between her and the scene, telling others to handle the situation because she was supposedly too new to understand what was happening. Maya stood there in silence. She could feel the anger building, but she refused to give them the reaction they seemed to be waiting for. What they didn't realize was that Maya had spent years learning how to remain calm when people underestimated her. And she was noticing everything. Every unfair assignment, every suspicious question, every officer who treated her differently, every decision made without knowing that someone was watching. By the end of the shift, Maya had documented enough behavior to reveal a disturbing pattern. But there was one final piece of information she still hadn't shared. The following morning, the entire department was ordered into a mandatory meeting. And when Maya walked through the doors, the officers who had spent the previous day trying to intimidate her suddenly realized something was very, very wrong. The meeting room fell silent when Maya walked to the front. The officers who had mocked her the day before suddenly stopped whispering. The same men who had questioned her credentials were now staring at her, confused. At the head of the table sat the department's outgoing captain, but beside him was an empty chair reserved for the person taking over effective immediately. Then the announcement came. Maya Thompson wasn't the new officer. She was the new captain. For a moment, nobody moved. The officers who had dismissed her suddenly understood why she had remained calm, why she had documented every incident, why she had asked questions instead of reacting. She had not been trying to prove that she belonged. She had been observing the department she was about to lead. The atmosphere changed instantly, but Maya didn't celebrate. She placed the report she had collected on the table, including records of discriminatory treatment, unfair assignments, and the way certain officers had targeted her simply because they assumed she was powerless. The room grew heavier with every page. What had looked like a harmless first-day initiation was now part of a much larger pattern. Some officers lowered their eyes. Others stared straight ahead, realizing that the woman they had treated like an outsider now had the authority to investigate their conduct. But Maya understood something even more important. This wasn't about embarrassing them. It was about changing what happened to the next black officer who walked through those doors. She looked across the room at the people who had judged her before knowing her name, and the entire balance of power had shifted. The woman they thought needed to prove herself had just become the person responsible for deciding what happened next. And now, she had a choice: protect the department's reputation or expose everything that had been hiding behind its badge. Maya chose neither silence nor revenge. Instead, she ordered a formal review of the department's practices. The officers involved were investigated, and the patterns she had documented were no longer something that could be dismissed as jokes, misunderstandings, or harmless workplace behavior. Some faced disciplinary action. Others were required to undergo additional training and accountability reviews. More importantly, the department began changing the way assignments, promotions, complaints, and internal investigations were handled. For Maya, becoming captain was never about having power over the people who had disrespected her. It was about making sure power could no longer be used to make someone else feel powerless. She continued walking through the same station every morning, wearing the same badge that some officers had once believed she didn't deserve. But now, younger officers saw something different when they looked at her. They saw someone who had faced prejudice without allowing it to define her. And Maya knew her story was bigger than one station. Racism doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it hides in who gets questioned, who gets trusted, who gets promoted, and who is forced to prove themselves again and again. That's why stories like Maya's matter. Because discrimination becomes easier to challenge when people are willing to recognize it, document it, and refuse to accept it as normal. Maya had walked into that station as the officer they underestimated. She walked out of that first confrontation as the leader who forced the department to look at itself. And maybe that's the lesson we should remember. Sometimes the person you judge by the color of their skin is the very person who will one day have the power to change the room. So ask yourself, how many people are still being underestimated simply because of what they look like? And how different could the world become if we stopped judging people before we ever took the time to know them?